Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe if you look at the program, the first thing I should say that I'm not David Hallberg, but I tried to replace him here today, and he's a very close friend to me, and he's a colleague, and so we both work for Stockholm University, and we both work for the Department of Computer and System Sciences, and we are both IT pedagogues, as you can read in the program. And it's also that I'm a co-author of the paper, and our common research field is telecenters. And I think here in India you have several names for telecenters. Some people call them learning centers, and it's not so far away from what Professor Xavier called study centers either. And in Sweden they were important like 20 years ago, when not everyone had a computer at home. And that, I think, is the thing in rural areas and semi-rural areas in Sri Lanka, that not every family has their own computers. So a telecenter is a meeting point where you have something like 3 to 4 computers, a printer, and mostly an internet connection as well. And if we should look at these trends here in educational management, I think that telecenter is not so trendy anymore. But that is one thing that makes that why I like telecenter, because the technology is quite mature now and not so hyped. But if we should look at something that is more trendy, maybe, is how to combine formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And what I like to discuss with you after my presentation and later here is that how you make the distinction between formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And also what we found here, what is the nice finding in our paper, is that this can be combined to what many speakers has been talking about here at the conference, lifelong learning, which maybe is one of the few things that we are good at in Sweden. But this will be quite a lot about Sri Lanka. And here is the third co-author of the paper, Niranjan Megamana. And if you were at e-India in Hyderabad in 2009, he presented very much about the telecenter movement in Sri Lanka. And this is actually the place where they have made the interviews and the observations, and it's called Kerindivela. If someone comes from Sri Lanka, you can correct my pronunciation. And it's a telecenter then in Gampaha, which is, it is what we find to be a semi-rural area. And earlier in my research, I've been looking very much at the digital divide between the cities and the rural areas. But here is areas that are somewhere in between. And I think what was discussed in the track for e-governance yesterday, that the kind of areas where the infrastructure is there, but really not the services. This is this kind of area. So it's not so different from Gujarat, I think. So that this idea of the telecenter, and to, I think what makes it powerful is to combine these telecenters in a network. Has been done in several emerging regions around the world. And I think that David has mostly been looking at different countries in Africa earlier. But I think this has been my field, that to look about the divide between the urban areas and the rural areas. But I find it very interesting now that David came with this new concept about these semi-rural areas, which I think maybe I have forgotten earlier. So we will look at what is the situation here then in Kerindivela, Gampaha. And so the aim of the study then, that this paper is about the ongoing research, and it's very much David's research. So he is the one who is specialized in the gender perspective. In my research, I look more about the difference between urban and rural areas. But why it makes some sense that I am the presenter here is that the theory to a larger extent is based upon our own previous research, and that is, I think, my research. which also was presented at E-India in Hyderabad 2 years ago. And when David came to our department, and he moved in to the same room where I am at work, I said to one of the first things I said when we discovered that we have the same research field, I said that, please prove me wrong. And I think that is what he's doing now. But I'm very glad that I survived his first test here. So these different learning modes then, that the formal learning, this is what we all done maybe too many years in school, and that's primary school, secondary school, university. When we have a curriculum and we have our courses, we have learning objectives and everything. But that can be the case also at the telecenter in non-formal learning, that which I think is a very Swedish way of being, but Sri Lankan as well, that like evening classes, like study circles, that we meet and look at some topic that we analyze some topic and study some topic that we agree on. And informal learning, that can be like during the tea break when I meet someone from Gujarat that tells me what is the situation here, and I will learn a lot. And I think the last thing here, lifelong learning, is what we all here are doomed to participate in, because we are in the ICT field and there comes new things all the time. So just because you have a universal degree doesn't mean that learning is over. But I think here, this is a quote from, and all the details are in our paper, so please, I will try to keep my time slot here. But this is one of the quotes from our paper here, that teachers must be aware of how to support children so they can develop a desire for lifelong learning. Because I think what sometimes is the case in Sri Lanka is that in the formal learning, that the kids are being scared from education, and it's quite a lot of dropouts. But we really impressed how it works here at these telecenters, and it's boys and girls and quite a lot of people that comes here, and what it actually is a finding in this study is that many of these kids here, they say that it's more fun to learn at the telecenter than it is at school. And I think that the question that remains is that what is wrong in school if they find it to be so more fun and inspiring to learn at the telecenter? I think someone should take a look at the national curriculum there. And I think technology-enhanced learning is what we call it in Europe, that for what you sometimes say computer-based learning here. But I think what we like here is that the operators, that they use ICT as an aid, as a complement to education. But traditional education is not forbidden. It's not forbidden to read a book. And sometimes they talk and chalk, and so it's really what Xavier mentioned as blended learning. And I think that is the concept, because pure technology and no teachers doesn't work. I think we more or less have proved this. So I think that you can always discuss in what percentage the blended learning, how it should be composed. But we found it to work well here at this telecenter. So the outcomes of the study then. The students learn non-formally in the telecenter, and then teaches their parents informally, and brings her and his knowledge into the formal classroom. And I think this is what we like to achieve, that also to have a dialogue with parents and the society outside school. So I think the combination of these three learning forms that are discussed in our article, and that the study shows that these three forms then together can be combined fruitfully and to achieve these lifelong learning. And also that the telecenter, it's a very mix of ages. So from the youngest students are like 7 to 8 years, and you can also find people that are 40, 50 years. So I think that that could be interesting in the future, like we have kept in Sweden. The telecenters doesn't have any there's no really need for them now, because everyone in Sweden has their computers at home and internet connection. But some people use them still, yeah, as a meeting point to just get in touch with other people and discuss. And then David had a lot of discussions about these gender questions, and that I think in Sri Lanka they are very proud, and I think maybe in the same way as we are in Sweden, that think that we've gone so far when it comes to gender equality, so there's nothing left to do. But I think that is quite a dangerous attitude. So we found that there are some differences, and the most obvious thing was that women, they preferred basic training, basic computer training, how to use the office package and stuff like this. But on the other hand, that men, I don't know if this is a general thing, or you have to ask David, I think, but in this case, that men preferred training connected to the professional. So that men wanted to have vocational training, and women wanted to learn more in general. Yeah, I think my time slot is running out, and I think that what I will end with is that that in our recommendations, that don't forget these semi-rural areas, because it can be quite a big variation if you compare with urban areas. So even if the big city is just some kilometers away, there's a need for telecenters. So thank you so much for your attention.